Alexander Drake, a self-made billionaire and the CEO of Drake Industries, prided himself on having complete control over every aspect of his life. Each morning, he meticulously planned his day, from shareholder meetings to high-stakes contract negotiations. But this particular morning, something unusual caught his eye amidst the pile of routine mail on his polished mahogany desk. A simple, cream-colored envelope stood out. It had no return address, just his name, Alexander Drake, written in elegant, flowing handwriting. Inside, he found a single, glossy photograph of a baby, perhaps a few months old, with striking green eyes and a wide, dimpled smile. For a moment, Alexander's heart froze. There was something disturbingly familiar about the baby, something that stirred long-buried memories. Turning the photo over, he found a short, handwritten message. "You can't ignore your past forever." The words cut through his composure like a blade. Alexander felt a sudden, icy rush of anxiety. He had always believed that the past should never dictate the present, that success came from focusing on the future and letting go of old wounds. But this mysterious letter threatened to unravel the tightly wound threads of his carefully controlled world. He examined the envelope more closely, hoping for a clue, a postmark, a fingerprint, a faint scent of perfume, but found nothing. It was as if the sender had erased all traces of their identity, leaving only this unsettling photo as a ghostly reminder of something he had tried to forget. Alexander's mind raced through the possibilities. Was this some kind of sick prank by a corporate rival, a trap designed to distract him at a critical moment? Or was it something far more personal, a ghost from a chapter of his life he had long since closed? As he leaned back in his leather chair, his thoughts drifted to the only person who could possibly be connected to this haunting image, Lily. Years ago, she had been a bright, free-spirited artist who had stolen his heart during a wild, unforgettable summer. They had been opposites. He, the ambitious entrepreneur driven by logic and numbers, and she, the passionate dreamer who lived for color and chaos. Their love had burned hot and fast, but it ended just as abruptly as it had begun, with Lily disappearing without a trace. For years, Alexander had buried that part of his life, building his empire brick by brick, layer by layer, insulating himself from the vulnerabilities of human attachment. But now, the sight of that baby's green eyes, a mirror of his own, shattered his carefully constructed walls. The message on the back of the photo echoed in his mind, a relentless whisper he could no longer ignore. "You can't ignore your past forever." Alexander realized that this was not just a warning, but a challenge, a call to confront the ghosts of his past before they consumed his future. Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that his world had just shifted in a way he couldn't fully grasp. The baby's eyes, so bright, so unmistakably similar to his own, kept pulling his thoughts back to that distant summer with Lily. He had been younger then, full of raw ambition, but still open to the thrill of love. They had met at an art gallery in Soho, where Lily's vibrant, expressive paintings had captured his attention, just as her wild, untamed spirit had captured his heart. They were a paradox, two opposing forces drawn together by a chemistry neither could resist. For months, they had danced through the city's neon-lit nights, whispered promises in darkened corners, and dreamed of a future unburdened by expectation. But just as quickly as their romance had flared to life, it had crumbled. One morning, Lily simply vanished, leaving no note, no explanation, only a hollow ache in Alexander's chest. He had buried that part of his past, pouring his heart and soul into building his company, using his drive to forget the pain of her sudden departure. But now, this envelope, this photograph, this cryptic message, all of it felt like a cruel echo of that abandoned dream. Unable to focus, Alexander reached for his phone and dialed his old friend Thomas, a sharp-minded attorney who had been his confidant through countless business battles. "Thomas, I need your advice," Alexander said, his voice uncharacteristically tense. "I received something this morning, something that's troubling." Thomas listened patiently as Alexander described the envelope, the baby photo, and the mysterious note. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Thomas finally spoke. "You can't ignore this, Alex," he said, his tone grave. "If there's even a chance this child is yours, you need to find out the truth. If you don't, it could come back to haunt you." "But how?" Alexander muttered, frustration lacing his words. I have no idea where Lily is, if she's even in New York anymore. Then we start from the beginning, Thomas replied firmly. I'll reach out to some contacts, but you should consider hiring a private investigator. Someone who can trace her steps, dig into her life. With that, Alexander found himself making a decision he never thought he'd face. Digging into a past he had fought so hard to forget, all for a child he wasn't even sure was his. After a sleepless night, filled with swirling thoughts and old regrets, Alexander wasted no time. He reached out to Samantha Cole, a private investigator known for her relentless work ethic and razor-sharp instincts. She had a reputation for finding people who didn't want to be found, a skill that Alexander now desperately needed. When Samantha answered his call, her voice was steady and professional, betraying none of the curiosity she surely felt upon hearing the name of one of the wealthiest men in the country. Mr. Drake, what can I do for you? She asked, her tone crisp. I have a personal matter I need you to look into, Alexander replied, forcing his voice to remain calm despite the turmoil brewing inside him. It's delicate, and I need complete discretion. Understood, Samantha said, already clicking away at her keyboard as she prepared to take notes. What's the situation? Alexander hesitated for a moment. He had built his empire by staying one step ahead of everyone else, by never letting his emotions cloud his judgment. But now, with a single mysterious photograph, his iron-willed focus was being tested. He explained the envelope, the baby's picture, and the haunting message. Samantha listened without interruption, her pen scratching across her notebook as she absorbed every detail. Do you have any idea who might have sent it? She finally asked. There's only one person who comes to mind, Alexander admitted. Her name is Lily. We had a relationship years ago, but she disappeared without a trace. I haven't seen or heard from her since. Samantha leaned back in her chair, already forming a plan. All right, I'll start with the basics. Recent address searches, social media activity, financial records. If she's out there, I'll find her. Alexander felt a mix of relief and dread as he ended the call. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable, like a man walking on thin ice, every step threatening to crack the carefully constructed world he had built. As the days passed, Samantha's updates came sporadically. She traced Lily's last known address to a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, a world away from the polished, glassy towers of Manhattan where Alexander lived. It seemed Lily had kept a low profile, moving frequently and never staying in one place for too long. Then, one evening, Samantha called with a breakthrough. I found something, she said, her voice tinged with urgency. There's a small art gallery in Brooklyn where she used to exhibit her work. I'm heading there tomorrow to see if they know anything. Alexander felt his pulse quicken. He had spent years trying to forget that chapter of his life, but now, it felt like the past was rushing back to confront him. He thanked Samantha and hung up, staring at the baby's photo once more, those bright green eyes still holding him in their unblinking gaze. Whatever the truth was, he was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. The next morning, Samantha walked through the creaking doors of the Linden Street Art Collective, a small, bohemian gallery tucked away in a forgotten corner of Brooklyn. Dusty sunlight filtered through tall, grimy windows, casting long shadows over walls filled with paintings of every conceivable style. It was a place where raw, unfiltered creativity thrived, a stark contrast to the polished, calculated world Alexander had chosen. As she moved through the narrow halls, Samantha's sharp eyes scanned each piece. She paused in front of a series of portraits, each one capturing the fleeting moments of human emotion, laughter, sorrow, longing. And then she saw it. A large canvas dominated one wall, painted in deep, swirling hues of green and gold. The center of the piece featured a small child, his eyes a piercing green, his smile familiar. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. There was no mistaking it. The child in the painting was the same one from the photograph. She approached the gallery owner, a graying woman with paint-streaked hands and a cigarette dangling from her lips. Excuse me, I'm looking for an artist named Lily. Do you know her? The woman glanced up, her eyes narrowing as she assessed Samantha. Lily? Yeah, I know her. She used to show here, years ago. Haven't seen her in a while, though. Samantha felt a flicker of hope. Do you have any idea where she might be now? The woman shrugged, taking a long drag from her cigarette. Last I heard, She moved upstate. Said she needed space to think, to breathe. But that was a while back. She's always been a bit of a ghost, you know? Samantha nodded, scribbling the information down. She took a closer look at the painting once more. Beneath the image of the child, in small, flowing letters, was the title My Heart's Legacy. It was a name that spoke volumes, a silent confession captured in oil and canvas. Samantha snapped a quick photo of the piece before heading back out into the bustling Brooklyn streets. She dialed Alexander as she walked, the sound of passing cars and distant sirens filling the background. "I found something," she said without preamble. "It's not a smoking gun, but it's a start. We might be closer to finding out the truth than we thought." Alexander's voice crackled through the line, tense and expectant. "Then keep going, Samantha. I need to know." As she hung up, Samantha felt a surge of determination. She had seen enough to know that this was more than just a simple case of lost love. There were deeper secrets waiting to be uncovered, and she intended to find them. 2 days later, Samantha arrived at Alexander's office, her face set in a serious expression as she placed a thick manila folder on his desk. Alexander looked up, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been waiting for this moment, dreading it as much as he desired it. "I found her," Samantha said, folding her arms as she leaned against the edge of his desk. "Or at least, I found where she might have been." Alexander straightened, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "Tell me everything." Samantha flipped open the folder, revealing a stack of photos, address logs, and financial records. She tapped one of the photos, a small, sun-drenched cottage nestled among the trees of upstate New York. "She's been living here for the past few years," Samantha said. "Quiet, off the grid for the most part. No social media, no public records except for a few art sales and occasional local exhibitions. She's practically a ghost." Alexander reached for the photo, his hand trembling slightly. The cottage looked nothing like the chaotic, bustling city life they once shared. It seemed like the kind of place someone would go to hide, to retreat from the world. He flipped through the papers, his eyes catching on a name he hadn't seen in years, Lily Harper. "There's more," Samantha continued, her voice lowering. "I spoke to a few people at that Brooklyn gallery. They remembered her talking about a child, but they didn't know much. She kept to herself. But one detail stood out." Alexander looked up, his eyes sharp. "What is it?" Samantha hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a second photo. It was another painting from the gallery, this one even more striking than the first. The same child, with those unmistakable green eyes, surrounded by swirling shades of emerald and sapphire. The title at the bottom read, "Legacy of a Summer Love." "She's been painting him for years," Samantha said softly. "Whoever this child is, he's clearly a central part of her life." Alexander felt the walls closing in around him. He had spent years building his empire, defining himself by his financial success, his ability to control every aspect of his world. But here, in these brushstrokes, was a truth he had ignored for far too long, a piece of his past that had refused to be erased. For the first time in years, he felt truly afraid, not of financial loss or corporate betrayal, but of the possibility that he had missed something profoundly important, that he had a son, a living, breathing child, and that he had failed him without even knowing it. "What do you want to do next?" Samantha asked, her eyes searching his for direction. Alexander took a deep breath, his mind racing. He could ignore this, pretend it was just a coincidence, bury the truth once more. But as he looked at the photo of the child, those bright green eyes staring back at him, he realized he couldn't. "Find her," he said, his voice steely with determination. "I need to know the truth." The drive upstate felt both endless and terrifyingly short. As the city's steel and glass towers gave way to rolling hills and dense forests, Alexander's mind raced through 1,000 different scenarios. He had spent years training himself to master every situation, to control every variable. But now, as he approached the cottage where Lily supposedly lived, he felt like a young man again, unsure, exposed, vulnerable. He pulled into the gravel driveway, the crunch of the tires beneath him echoing in the quiet morning air. The cottage stood nestled among tall, whispering pines, its weathered wooden walls and sun-bleached shutters giving it a quaint, almost forgotten charm. He stepped out, his polished Italian shoes sinking slightly into the loose gravel as he approached the front door. Before he could knock, the door creaked open. Lily stood there, framed by the soft morning light. She looked older, her hair a little darker, her eyes a little wiser, but still unmistakably the woman who had once stolen his heart. She held a paintbrush in one hand, flecks of blue and green dotting her fingers, her eyes widening as they met his. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird somewhere in the trees. Finally, Alexander found his voice. "Lily," he said, his throat tight. "It's been a long time." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she stepped aside, silently inviting him in. Inside, the cottage was filled with light and color. Canvases leaned against every wall, their vivid hues creating a chaotic yet beautiful tapestry of memories. He caught glimpses of familiar scenes, a rooftop sunset, a late-night walk through Central Park, a quiet morning by the river. And there, hanging above the stone fireplace, was a portrait of the child. Alexander felt his heart clench as he took in the painting. It was unmistakable. The same bright green eyes, the same dimpled smile. His son. Lily set her paintbrush down, crossing her arms as she leaned against the doorframe. Her eyes never left his face, her jaw set, a storm of emotions flickering behind her gaze. "You got my letter," she said finally, her voice softer than he remembered. Alexander nodded, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "Why didn't you tell me, Lily?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "Why keep this from me all these years?" Lily's eyes hardened. "You wouldn't have understood. You had your world, your empire to build. And I had mine." For a long moment, they just stood there, two people who had once shared everything, now struggling to bridge the distance that years of silence had carved between them. Finally, Alexander took a deep breath, his fists clenching at his sides. "I want to meet him," he said, his voice firm. "I want to know my son." Lily's expression softened, just a fraction, but enough for him to catch a glimpse of the woman he had once loved. She took a step back, turning towards the small hallway that led deeper into the cottage. "Come in," she said, her voice steady but filled with a hint of trepidation. "He's in the backyard, painting." As Alexander followed her through the small, cluttered living room, he felt his pulse quicken, his heart pounding with every step. He was about to meet his son for the first time, a child he never even knew existed. As Alexander followed Lily through the narrow hallway, his mind raced with questions. What kind of boy was his son? What had he missed in all these years? Could he ever make up for lost time? The walls of the cottage were lined with sketches and watercolor paintings, bright splashes of color capturing the fleeting moments of childhood. Crayon-drawn rockets, stick figures holding hands, and a vibrant sun with a smiling face filled every available space. They reached the back door, and Lily paused, her hand resting on the doorknob. She turned to face Alexander, her expression a mixture of caution and resolve. "Before you meet him," she said quietly, her eyes locking onto his, "you need to understand something. He's my whole world, Alex. I raised him alone. He doesn't know you, and he doesn't know your world. Don't overwhelm him." Alexander swallowed, the weight of her words sinking deep into his chest. He gave a slow, understanding nod, his heart hammering in his chest. Lily opened the door, and sunlight flooded the small kitchen. Outside, the backyard stretched into a lush, overgrown garden. The air was thick with the scent of pine and freshly cut grass, the soft buzz of insects filling the space. Near a small, worn picnic table covered in splatters of paint, a young boy sat with his back to them, his small hands carefully guiding a paintbrush across a canvas propped up on an easel. His brown hair caught the morning light, and even from a distance, Alexander could see the same green eyes he had noticed in the photograph. Lily took a step outside, and Alexander followed, his breath shallow and unsteady. As they approached, the boy turned, his eyes lighting up as he saw his mother. "Mom," he said, his voice bright and full of youthful energy. "Look, I'm almost done with my spaceship." Lily smiled, crouching beside him. "It looks amazing, sweetheart. You're getting better every day." Alexander stood a few feet back, frozen in place. He felt an overwhelming rush of emotions, pride, fear, regret, all colliding in his chest. For a moment, he was a stranger in his own son's life, an intruder in a scene he should have been part of all along. Lily glanced back at him, her eyes urging him to take the final step. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on her son's shoulder. "There's someone I want you to meet." The boy looked up, his bright green eyes locking onto Alexander's for the first time. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stand still. Alexander felt a jolt, a recognition so deep it took his breath away. "Charlie," Lily continued, her voice steady but tinged with a trace of uncertainty. "This is Alexander. He's an old friend." Charlie studied the tall, well-dressed man before him, his young mind processing the unfamiliar face. Then, to Alexander's surprise, the boy extended a small, paint-streaked hand. "Hi," he said, his voice curious but polite. "I'm Charlie." Alexander reached out, his much larger hand enveloping his son's. He felt a surge of warmth as their palms met, a connection that felt both fragile and unbreakable. "Hi, Charlie," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. It's really nice to meet you." For the first time in years, Alexander felt truly alive, standing in the sun-dappled garden of a life he had never known existed. Over the next few hours, Alexander found himself in a world completely foreign yet strangely familiar. He watched as Charlie painted with the fierce concentration of a young artist, his little brow furrowing as he carefully filled in the rocket's flaming engines with bright red and orange. Lily moved around the garden, trimming overgrown branches and occasionally casting wary glances toward them, as if afraid the moment might shatter at any second. Alexander, unsure of how to navigate this new reality, found himself sitting on the edge of the picnic table, trying to catch glimpses of his son's creative process without seeming intrusive. He noticed the way Charlie's hands moved, the way he tilted his head when deciding on a color, small, familiar gestures that mirrored his own habits in the boardroom. "Do you like spaceships?" Charlie suddenly asked, his bright eyes flicking up to meet Alexander's. Caught off guard, Alexander chuckled nervously. "I do," he replied, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. "I've always liked the idea of exploring the unknown." Charlie's eyes lit up, and he leaned closer, his paintbrush paused in midair. "Me too. I want to be an astronaut someday. I'm going to build my own spaceship and fly to Mars." Alexander felt a pang in his chest. How many of his own childhood dreams had he abandoned in the relentless pursuit of wealth and power? How different might his life have been if he had known about Charlie sooner? "You'd make a great astronaut," he said, his voice more confident now. "Exploring the unknown takes a lot of courage." Charlie grinned, the same infectious smile that had haunted Alexander since he first opened that mysterious envelope. For a brief moment, the weight of their complicated history seemed to fade, replaced by the simple, pure connection of a father and son sharing a dream. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden, Lily approached them, a towel in one hand and a weary, uncertain smile on her lips. "Charlie, why don't you wash up for dinner?" she said gently, ruffling his hair. "We've got your favorite tonight, spaghetti." "Okay, Mom," Charlie said, dropping his paintbrush and rushing toward the back door, leaving a trail of small, colorful footprints behind him. As the door creaked shut behind him, Alexander found himself alone with Lily for the first time since he arrived. She crossed her arms, her eyes guarded, as if bracing for a storm. "You're good with him," she said finally, her voice tinged with something like reluctant approval. Alexander looked down at his hands, still faintly stained with Charlie's vibrant paint. He felt a knot in his throat as he looked back up at her. "I missed so much," he whispered, his voice thick with regret. "I had no idea, Lily. If I had known." She cut him off, her eyes hardening. You don't get to rewrite history. I did what I thought was best, and maybe it was the wrong choice, but I did it alone." Alexander felt the sting of her words, but he also saw the pain behind them. The years of sacrifice, the lonely nights, the weight of a decision made in desperation. "I just want a chance," he said, his voice firm but pleading. "A chance to know him, to be his father." Lily's eyes softened, just a fraction, as she looked back toward the cottage where their son had disappeared. She took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Then you'll have to earn it," she said quietly, turning back to the house. "For both of us." As she disappeared into the cottage, Alexander stood alone in the fading light, the echoes of her words lingering in the air. He had come here seeking answers, but now he realized he was just beginning a much longer journey, a journey that might finally teach him what it truly meant to love and be loved. The days that followed felt surreal to Alexander. For years, his life had been defined by numbers, contracts, and high-stakes decisions made from the corner office of a skyscraper overlooking Manhattan. Now, his world had shifted to this small, sunlit cottage where paintbrushes outnumbered fountain pens, and the echoes of a child's laughter replaced the steady hum of corporate deals. He started visiting more often, making the long drive upstate every few days, each trip a step further into the unknown world of fatherhood. At first, his interactions with Charlie were tentative and awkward. He felt like an outsider in his own son's life, a distant figure trying to earn the trust of a child who had grown up without him. But slowly, bit by bit, that began to change. One morning, as they sat together at the old picnic table, Charlie pulled out a stack of his sketches, proudly showing Alexander his collection of rockets, planets, and space adventures. His eyes sparkled as he explained the details of each drawing, his small hands moving animatedly as he described the engines, the thrusters, and the brave astronauts he imagined piloting his creations. "Maybe one day, you can come to my rocket launch," Charlie said, his green eyes bright with excitement. "I'm going to be the first kid to build a spaceship." Alexander felt a swell of pride and affection so strong it took his breath away. He leaned in closer, his own eyes reflecting the hope and wonder in his son's. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he replied, reaching out to gently ruffle Charlie's hair. As the days passed, they found other ways to connect. Alexander taught Charlie how to build small models of his spaceship designs, their fingers working together over the small plastic parts and tubes as they pieced together miniature rockets. They played catch in the garden, their laughter ringing through the trees as the sun dipped lower on the horizon. And through it all, Alexander found himself learning from Charlie just as much as he hoped to teach him. The boy's pure, unguarded enthusiasm for life reminded him of a time before spreadsheets and profit margins had consumed his every waking thought. It was a reminder of the young man he had once been, the dreamer who had once fallen in love with a free-spirited artist in the heart of the city. One evening, as the three of them sat around the small, cozy dining table, Charlie chattered excitedly about his latest drawing, a spaceship with wings like a hawk and engines that glowed like the setting sun. Alexander found himself glancing at Lily, catching the faint, wistful smile on her lips as she watched their son talk. In that moment, Alexander realized just how much he had missed, not just in Charlie's life, but in his own. He had built an empire, conquered the business world, and become a household name. But here, in this small, cluttered cottage, he had found something far more precious, a family he never knew he needed. As the evening stretched into night, Alexander leaned back in his chair, watching his son's eyes sparkle as he described his next great adventure. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves turned golden and the air grew sharp with the promise of winter, Alexander made the long drive to the cottage once again. But this time, he brought something with him, a small, wrapped package tucked carefully into the passenger seat beside him. When he arrived, Charlie was outside, bundled up in a bright blue jacket, his cheeks flushed with the morning chill as he kicked a soccer ball around the garden. He looked up, his eyes lighting up as Alexander stepped out of the car. "Hey, Dad," he called out, his voice bright with excitement. The word Dad still sent a jolt through Alexander's heart every time he heard it, a title he had never expected to claim, but now cherished more than anything. Alexander walked over, the small package in his hand, his heart pounding with a mix of nerves and anticipation. "I have something for you," he said, kneeling down to Charlie's eye level. Charlie's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he took the package, his small fingers carefully unwrapping the bright paper. Inside, he found a polished, metal nameplate, its surface engraved with neat, precise letters. "Captain Charlie Drake, future astronaut." For a moment, the boy just stared at the plaque, his mouth hanging open in surprise. Then he looked up, his green eyes wide with wonder. "Wow, is this for my spaceship?" he asked, his voice trembling with excitement. Alexander smiled, feeling his own eyes mist over. "Yes, buddy. Every great spaceship needs a great captain, and I can't think of anyone better for the job." Charlie threw his arms around his father's neck, hugging him tightly. Alexander wrapped his arms around his son, holding him close as the cool autumn wind whispered through the trees. From the doorway, Lily watched the scene unfold, her eyes shining with a mix of relief and pride. She had fought so hard to build a world for her son, to give him a life filled with creativity and love, and now she felt the final pieces of that world falling into place. As Alexander pulled back, looking into his son's beaming face, he felt a deep, unshakable certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever mistakes he had made in the past, he would face them as a father, a role he had come to cherish more than any title, any corporate empire, any boardroom victory. He took a deep breath, his arm around Charlie's small shoulders, and looked up at the clear, endless sky. "I promise, Charlie," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll always be here for you, no matter what." And as the leaves rustled around them, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson, Alexander felt the warmth of a new beginning. The first chapter of a story he had almost missed, but now held closer than anything he had ever known. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Alexander found himself becoming a constant presence in Charlie's life. He learned to appreciate the small moments, the quiet walks through the woods, the shared laughter over half-burnt marshmallows, the whispered bedtime stories about brave astronauts and distant stars. Each day, he discovered a new part of himself, a side he had buried beneath years of business deals and corporate takeovers. Charlie's dreams of space and adventure reminded Alexander of the limitless possibilities he had once imagined for himself. And as he watched his son grow, he realized that, despite all his wealth and power, this small boy with bright green eyes had given him the greatest gift of all, a second chance at family, at love, and at a life filled with purpose. One evening, as they sat together on the back porch, watching the stars slowly blink into view, Charlie leaned against his father's side, his small hand resting in Alexander's. "Dad," he whispered, his voice tinged with the drowsy warmth of a long day spent outdoors, "do you think I'll really make it to Mars one day?" Alexander smiled, wrapping his arm around his son. "I know you will, Charlie, and I'll be cheering you on every step of the way." As the stars shimmered above them, stretching endlessly across the dark canvas of the night sky, Alexander felt a deep, unshakable peace. He had spent his life reaching for the heights of power, but here, in this small, quiet corner of the world, he had found something far greater, true, unbreakable love. Thank you for watching this heartwarming story of family, redemption, and the power of second chances. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales like this one. We'd love to have you join our community. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most precious things in life are the ones we almost miss.